So we're going to cover chapter 22. Uh, this is going to be section 1 and 2 to start. So section 1 starts off with the 1948 election. Now, the thing about this election is that you have Truman, who's a Democrat, and he the Democrats don't even ask him to be the candidate. They actually go to Eisenhower and they ask Eisenhower if he would be their candidate, and Eisenhower declines. So then the Democrats said, "Well, I suppose we should go ahead and go. I suppose we should ask Truman if he wants to be the candidate." So Truman accepts the nomination. Um, the problem is that Southern Democrats don't like that Truman is showing movement towards helping African Americans in the South. So they form what are called the Dixiecrats, and they nominate Strom Thurmond to be their candidate. And while all this is going on, the Republicans nominate Thomas Dewey, and the Democratic Party is fragmented. There's like three different candidates. You have Strom Thurmond running, you have Harry Truman running, there's another candidate that's running, and the Republicans just have Thomas Dewey. And whenever you have a political party that fragments, usually their success is quite limited. And Thomas Dewey's thinking, I've got this election in the bag, and so he doesn't do a whole lot when it comes to campaigning. I mean, yeah, he goes to the states that he knows the Republicans are going to win. He gives speeches here and there, but Truman really hits the campaign trail hard. Um, he lets the American people know that he has no problem in making the tough decisions. He uses his decision to use the atomic bombs on Japan as an example. And what happens is that the night of election day, the Chicago Tribune, they want to be the first major news publication to announce who the winner of the 1948 presidential election is. And so before the ballots are even counted, the Chicago Tribune they go ahead and they print their paper for the next day, and the headline reads, "Dewey defeats Truman," like you can see on the slide here. And they send it out. Well, the results start coming back, and lo and behold, Truman pulls off what is deemed one of the larger upsets in presidential election history. Even as the incumbent, people just didn't think he was going to win. And again, when you have the Democratic Party that's fragmented like they were, who would have thought that he wins? And so the Chicago Tribune, realizing, uh-oh, we just made a big boo-boo, before they can get all of the papers collected up that they've sent out, somehow someone within the Truman election campaign gets a hold of a paper and gives it to Harry Truman, and that's the picture of him showing that Dewey has defeated him, as the headline reads, when in reality Truman actually defeated Dewey. Truman did have a few successes in his first full term as president. The nickname for his domestic policy was the Fair Deal, which was supposed to be an extension of Roosevelt's New Deal. He did succeed in raising the minimum wage to 75 cents. Now, if we were in class, I'd pull up the inflation calculator. Let me go ahead and stop the video, and I'll pull that up. So I went ahead and plugged 75 cents into the inflation calculator. So if you were earning 75 cents an hour back in June of 1948, that'd be like earning $8.05 in February of 2020. So not too bad. So moving on here. So then the election of 1952. Dwight D. Eisenhower, after seeing how Truman handled Korea, and when Truman fires his good buddy MacArthur, um, Eisenhower decides I'm going to run in the election, and this time he's a Republican, and he runs against Adlai Stevenson, governor of Illinois. And Eisenhower defeats him in what is one of the largest landslide victories in the history of presidential elections. Eisenhower's the nickname of his domestic policy is dynamic conservatism, and Eisenhower does some good things as president. He also does some things that are really going to hurt our country as well. One of those is he cuts money to expenses to schools and businesses, and one of the reasons why he does this is he wants to build more infrastructure. He wants a better interstate highway system in the United States. When Eisenhower was in Germany in World War II, he saw what Hitler had done with the Autobahn, that superhighway system that was built. And the main reason it was built was to help Germany get supplies, troops, equipment from one side of Germany to the other. Hitler played it off as I'm going to build this and it's going to put hundreds of thousands of people to work. The underlying factor was world dominance, and that all began in Europe. Eisenhower looks at the capability that the United States has of getting supplies, troops, equipment from one side of the country to the other. If we were to be attacked on the West Coast, what kind of capability do we have of getting everything from East Coast to West Coast or vice versa? And as he looked at our interstate highway system, he realized that it was not very adept for that. So he needed hundreds of millions of dollars for this, and in order to be able to come up with that money and not have to raise taxes, it's simple. You cut money from other areas, and the money that you cut from those areas, you simply put into this. And that's exactly what he did. Now, you see at the bottom here that he did raise minimum wage up to $1. So again, I'm going to exit out. I'm going to go to the inflation calculator, and I'll put in $1. And we can see now this was during his initial election. So we'll go 1954 when he did this, and we'll calculate that. So you can see that if you were making $1 an hour in June of 1954, that's like making $9.62 an hour today. So again, not too bad, keeping all things relative. Eisenhower runs for re-election again in 1956 and wins that election pretty easily. Now we're going to move on to section 3 of chapter 22. What we have going on in the 1950s is that the economy of the United States is booming. The national debt of the United States was actually lower in 1959 than it was in 1950. The United States was actually making money, and that's the U.S. being involved in a war from 1950 to 1953. So once that's put behind us, the economy is doing quite well. And we're talking about people making money, people spending money, and they're doing it on a one-income household. It's not that mom and dad are both working. It's mainly just dad working. And people are able to afford what it is that they want. You can see that home ownership is up by 60%. People are willing to go out and spend money, and they're also putting money in the bank, and that's what's allowing people to take out loans to build new homes and to buy the latest automobile that they want. Is that people are making enough money, they can buy these items, they still have money to put in the bank, which allows more people to take out loans. It allows businesses to take out loans. It allows businesses to expand. Things are going quite well in the United States. The 1950s is kind of known as the age of conformity, and One of the individuals that really helped with this was a guy by the name of Bill Levitt. Bill Levitt had this idea that I am going to build homes that are very similar in their structure. What he does is he goes 10 miles outside of New York City and he buys what used to be a potato field. And in this potato field, he says, okay, I'm going to start building homes. He's going to develop it as a residential area. Because people have money, because everyone has an automobile, they don't have to live close to work. They can drive back and forth from home to their job. And Levitt's going to capitalize on this. This is going to be the rise of suburbia. And so what happens is that he starts building these homes. And because the blueprints for the homes are pretty much the same, it's almost like mass production. Once you get construction crews in there and they start building a couple of these homes, then with each house they build, they get it done in an even shorter amount of time. And because the main structure of these homes is so similar, the lumber can be cut, the dimensions of the lumber can be cut very similar, almost identical. And so the lumber that was used in house A can also be used in house B, can also be used in house C, because the dimensions are all the same. And the other thing is that I'm not saying that these are extravagant, lavish houses, but they're nice 2-3 bedroom homes, 1-2 bathrooms in them, decent sized kitchen, living room, dining room. And you could get one of these houses completely furnished, ready to move in, for less than $20,000 back during this time. And this is all thanks to Bill Levitt. Now, something else that happens. We have millions of soldiers that are coming back from World War II. They've been in Europe. They've been in Asia. They've been away from loved ones, girlfriends, wives, American women in general. And when they get back to the United States, next thing you know, women are having babies left and right. And so this chart right here shows what happens. Here is about 1946. You can see the sharp increase all throughout the 1950s. There's a sharp increase. And what you have to realize is that as the economy is doing well, people are going to have more babies. Again, if we were in class, we would take the time to look this up. But if I were to tell you to just do a quick search as to what does it cost the average American family today to raise a child from the age of from birth to the age of 18, you might be surprised. On average, it's about $250,000, $250,000. Obviously, the more money a family has, the more that family's going to spend. So in some cases, you have some families that it's no big deal for them to spend $2, $3, $4 million on their child from birth to the age of 18, and that's per child. But for the most part, it's about it's right around $250,000. And what you have happening, and so these people are known as baby boomers. Now you notice on this chart that throughout the late 60s and throughout the 70s, you see that the number of births start to go down. And then look what happens when we get to the late 70s, when we get to the early 80s. What's happening here is that these individuals that were born in the first part of the baby boom, now they're parents and they're starting to have kids. And what you're going to see happen is that you're going to see millions of individuals that are going through similar life experiences all at the same time. And this is where we're going to start when we come back with the next video.